Mr. Martin, I have a quote I'd like to give back to you that you said at, I believe it was COP11, which is a number of years ago, and I believe you were addressing Mr. Bush at the time. And you said, to the reticent nations, including the United States, I say there is such a thing as a global conscience. What were you getting at there?
Oh, exactly what I said. You know, we're all individual countries. And I believe very much that an individual country has got to have the sovereign right to manage itself. But that sovereignty doesn't just carry with it rights, it carries duties. And underlying those duties has got to be the recognition that we are one world and that it's virtually impossible to do something in one part of the world and not affect another, and that's the conscience. And so obviously what happened at COP11 was the Americans were not supportive of all, and Canada was constantly fighting with the U.S. administration at that time to advance the yardsticks. And so I said that, and I meant it. That in fact, you know, the United States, as the most powerful country in the world, should be on board. They should not be the major blockage to the global conscience of the rest of the world. And let me give you an example. I mean, a modern example of what I meant, and to put it into that context. At the time that we were speaking, the European nations have just come together with what is virtually $1 trillion bailout for not just Greece, but a number of other nations. Why have they done that? They haven't done it just to protect Greece, or not just to protect Portugal and Spain and other countries which have got difficult financial conditions. They essentially did it to protect Europe. Now, why was the IMF in there? The IMF was in there because they recognized that this is not simply a European problem. We're such an interdependent world that, in fact, that now if we're not going to bring the whole of the situation down, we've all got to work together. Now, if that recognition exists in terms of the indebtedness of one small country in Europe, Greece, and the domino effect, then why in God's name does it not exist when you take a look at destroying, essentially, so many countries through rising waters, through drought, and all of the consequential effects of climate change? And that's what I meant when I talked to George Bush about the global conscience, and what I think that it even means more today. If it exists for financial reasons, then surely to God it exists in the protection of the planet.
Mr. Martin, you must be somewhat encouraged and discouraged to see how the changes that have occurred since that day at COP11, now with a different president in the United States and a different prime minister in Canada. Reflect on how you feel about how we're doing today.
Well, I don't think we're doing very well at all. You know, I mean, you know, the fact is that at Copenhagen, and those of us who were there could see that very well, Africa was ignored. The European Union, which was really leading on this, was ignored. I think that what is happening in the United States with their constant congressional elections, and therefore the inability to face up to climate change, I think is a problem. And I think that a lot of us really hope that the U.S. can figure out a way to deal with this. I think I have made it very clear the G20 meeting is coming up. The signals that were sent from the G8 and the G20 clearly to their membership at the time of Copenhagen were the wrong signals. The emerging economies and the developed economies were unable to come together. Now we've got a very important meeting coming up in Mexico. It's going to be focusing on climate change finance. We've got a meeting following that coming up in South Africa, where people now say, oh, well, that's where we'll be able to make the final deal. Well, you know as well as I what's happening here. We're just pushing the deal, pushing it off until it's going to be too late. Canada does not want to deal with climate change at the G20 meeting in June. That's wrong. The Mexicans want to deal with it. President Sarkozy of France says he wants to see it dealt with there. The Koreans want to see it dealt with. The fact is that Canada has a responsibility to ensure that climate change is dealt at that G20 meeting. Doesn't mean that it's going to find the solution, but the signals have got to be set so that the meeting in Mexico can succeed. That was not done for Copenhagen. For heaven's sakes, let's learn from our mistakes.
Mr. Martin, you talked about lakes and fish and that sort of thing as your early influences, and obviously you have a relationship with ships and things like that throughout your career. Who are your mentors in your life?
Well, certainly in terms of the environment. Maurice Strong had a huge influence on me. When I was younger, I had this influence as a result of my Lake Erie experience. I was also very interested in the Third World, and I went to see him, I said, I'm going to go off to Africa. I want to work in Africa, and I just graduated from law school. And he said, I think you're absolutely right. That's what Africa really needs, is another lawyer. And so he then said to me, look, come and work for me at Power Corporation, and I'll let you learn a little bit about the economy. And so I did. And obviously, he's had a continuing influence on me. Let me just tell you that in terms of going back to the question of the global issues, I think that probably the most unconscionable thing that the developed world has done is to constantly go to these international meetings, have the leaders have their pictures taken, and then walk away. And my first real example of that was, of course, the Rio conference that Maurice Strong chaired. And I was there, and I saw leader after leader go up there and basically say, this was the forerunner of Kyoto, and basically say, we're going to deal with this issue. We agree with this issue. And every single one of them walked away, and within 20 minutes after they got onto their planes, they had forgotten about it. And I don't think that I think that we can't make commitments any longer that we don't carry. Now, influence. I'll give you another influence, interestingly enough. Maurice Strong, I've told you. I have a 35-year-old son who is with Canada Steamship Lines. And he is an environmentalist in a way that I never was. I think that one of the good things about this is a generation. I had to learn about it. My son, it was bred into him. He was born with it. Not because of me, just because of his generation. So I think I probably had the influences from earlier than I was born and later after I was born.
Isn't that neat? Mr. Martin, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and thank you. And thank Pembina.
Thank you.
Okay.